On a frigid night in December 2022, 34-year-old Leila Duarte DaLuz left her home in the middle of the night in the company of a man she trusted. Leila was 2 months pregnant and wore a newly purchased engagement ring on her finger. When she got into the vehicle at 2:30 a.m., she would have known they were not alone. Her fiancé was with a friend, one with a sordid history. It was the last time Leila was seen alive. On the morning of December 21st, 2022, a fisherman in Coventry, Rhode Island, arrived at a local beauty spot in search of some trout. Carbuncle Pond is a 39-acre wooded and scenic body of water located within the Nicholas Farm area, known for its fishing, hiking trails, and the nearby Moosip River. It's a popular spot for outdoor recreation. That morning, the fisherman would not catch any trout. Spotted out in the freezing water, beneath bits of ice floating atop the frigid pond, was the body of a woman. State police were called out to the scene. Pulled from the pond was a dark-haired woman in her 30s. She was fully clothed but for her shoes and socks. She had sustained visible trauma to her. Investigators speculated that she had not been in the water very long. At first glance, the long wooden dock running into the pond showed no signs of a violent crime. Upon closer inspection, however, a trail of suspected blood emerged. Faint droplets and small drag marks stained the wood, creating a pathway from the brush out to the water. It seemed likely that the woman had been carried across it to the pond. In the woodland, investigators marked any potential indication of movement, areas where the vegetation had been recently disturbed. Their conclusion was that if the woman had been murdered, as it certainly appeared, it had not happened at Carbuncle Pond. The following day, an autopsy confirmed what was already suspected: a homicide. No less than 6 head lacerations were identified. Worse still, the medical examiner found water inside her lungs and stomach. She had been beaten, but alive, when she entered the water. The exam also determined the still unidentified woman had been 8 to 10 weeks pregnant. She wore a small gold engagement ring. On December 27th, 6 days after the fisherman discovered the body in the water, a missing persons report was filed with the Brockton Police Department in Massachusetts. 34-year-old Leila Duarte DaLuz was spotted by her landlord leaving her home in Brockton around 2:30 a.m. on the 21st. He had not seen or heard from her since. After she was reported missing in late December, an identification was made. Leila Duarte DaLuz was the woman found in the water. Her family overseas were notified. They were obviously devastated. Her sister Katie, who lived in Portugal, wrote of Leila as a kind, loving person and a friend to everyone. It was widely known that the father of Leila's unborn child was her ex-fiancé, a man named Gary Gromkiewicz. Their relationship history was pieced together through conversations with friends and acquaintances. Investigators learned that the two had recently parted ways, at which time Leila returned her engagement ring, and Gary returned to his previous girlfriend. Somehow, an engagement ring made its way back onto Leila's finger when she was found, though it was not the same one Gary had used to propose to her roughly 2 months prior. The recent turmoil in her romantic life set off alarm bells for investigators, even more so when they learned from Leila's landlord that when he left saw her in the early morning hours of December 21st, she was getting into an SUV with Gary. A canvass of video surveillance cameras around Carbuncle Pond and its surrounding woodland was unsuccessful. The area is rural with few residential or commercial buildings. Unable to trace Leila's movements back from that location, investigators instead began forming their timeline from where she was last seen, leaving her home in Brockton on the 21st. Her landlord had been correct. A black Jeep Grand Cherokee with Rhode Island plates was captured pulling out of the drive at almost exactly 2:30 a.m. That vehicle's ownership was traced to a friend of Gary's, 46-year-old Michael Lambert. Cell phone location data from all 3 individuals, Leila, Gary, and Michael, were aligned to video surveillance footage gathered from that night. The first stop was a Shell gas station in Brockton. Michael Lambert, dressed in a blue hoodie, fatigue trousers, and black Puma sneakers, exited the passenger side of his Jeep and entered the store. Shortly after, he paused, turned around, and went back out to the Jeep. In a very brief moment captured by the station's cameras, Gary is visible in the driver's seat. He appears to be wearing a patterned and red long-sleeved shirt. Leila is not visible. When Michael returned, he filled the tank with $40 in gas. Michael blew on his bare hands and rubbed them together for warmth. It was characteristically cold that night, with temperatures hovering around freezing, and then dropping below as the night wore on. Cameras continued to track the Jeep as it drove from Brockton towards Warwick, Rhode Island. On Jefferson Boulevard, the Jeep drove southbound at 3:38 a.m. 5 minutes later, it was captured still heading south on Buttonwoods from West Shore Road. The exact route taken by the Jeep, as captured by the cameras, had gaps. Cell phone data filled in some of the missing pieces. At 3:53 a.m., all three devices were in the approximate area of the Buttonwood section of Warwick. They remained in that location for 45 minutes. At 4:38, phone records tracked all three devices traveling through Pawtucket and into Lincoln. By the time the Jeep made another visible stop, this time at a 7-Eleven in Lincoln, only Michael was captured on camera. He emerged not from the passenger seat, as he had earlier in the night, but by the driver's side. Still photos showed him no longer wearing his blue hoodie, despite the cold. Investigators also believed they could now spot a visible hand injury that was not captured on the surveillance in Brockton. What they did not spot at the 7-Eleven was any sign of Gary. Investigators believed the camera recorded the silhouette of a person in the passenger seat. Whether that was Gary or Leila was yet unproven. That is because 15 minutes before the stop at 8:05 a.m., Gary's phone dropped off the network and could no longer be tracked. Only Michael and Leila's devices continued on in tandem. They connected in the area of the Lincoln Mall for about 10 minutes before arriving at the 7-Eleven. The separation of the devices during this period of time could prove integral for the investigation. From this point onwards, only Michael and Leila's phones traveled to West Coventry, to the area of Carbuncle Pond. They were there for about 40 minutes. It was determined that Michael left the pond around 7 a.m., still with Leila's phone. The Jeep was picked back up traveling east on Danielson Pike at 7:18, at which time Leila's device also stopped communicating with the network. Curiously, just after 8 a.m., Gary's phone reconnected, and he was back with the Jeep. In Cumberland, where Gary's girlfriend Miranda lived, the black Jeep pulled up outside, and a man wearing a patterned and red long-sleeved shirt resembling Gary exited the passenger side. The man opened the back hatch and retrieved a pink-colored bag and carried it into the house. He was inside the home for only 2 minutes before returning to the vehicle. He appeared to have changed his clothing. At 8:37, the Jeep drove away. Back at Carbuncle Pond, Leila's body had been discovered just minutes before, in the icy water under the dock. Rhode Island detectives picked up both Gary and Michael for questioning. It was not the first time that these two had found themselves on the wrong side of the law. Gary's first conviction was at the age of 20 for robbery. Later, in 2015, he served time for felony assault. His criminal history paled in comparison to his friend and one-time fellow inmate, Michael Lambert. In 1994, at age 17, Michael and another man brutally beat and stabbed a homeless man to death on Thanksgiving Day under an I-95 on-ramp in Providence.
19-year-old William Page and a 17-year-old juvenile. Police say both teens have long records.
From our perspective, this was a senseless, brutal murder. You can't possibly preclude the possibility that they would have, since they've already had the taste of it once, that it would have happened again had we not got them off the street as quickly as we did.
A family member told police that Michael had demonstrated disturbing and violent behavior since he was a child, including cruelty towards animals. On his first day of school, he took a steak knife with him and tore apart the school bus. When he was convicted of murder in 1995, no one in his family was surprised. The 45-year-old had been out on parole for just 9 months when Leila DaLuz was found. Gary was not interested in speaking with detectives, at least at first. Gary grew up with Wright. Clark, what you did with Gary. Do you have any questions about our investigation or what's happening? Yeah, what am I being charged with right now? You're being charged with conspiracy. Okay. Do you recall what that was? I would just like to speak to him, okay? Okay, all right. Do you not want to speak to us at this time? No. All right. That's right. That's your right. So we're going to end the AAV right now. Okay, okay. Thank you. Unlike Gary, Michael was open to speaking with detectives until he was presented with an image of himself taken from the 7-Eleven in Lincoln in the early morning hours of December 21st.
We know you were with Mike. You've been spending time with Mike. You've been spending time with Gary. I apologize, Mike. We know you've been spending time with Gary. All right, we know for an absolute fact. All right, we know that you were with him on December 20th and the 21st. We know you went up to Massachusetts and picked up him and his girlfriend. We know all about that night. All right, everything is because of that night. Okay, we have a lot of stuff, but we know that Gary is the person here. All right, I know your situation. All right, I don't like to have to put you in this position. All right, but we're in this position, and right now we need to know everything that Gary did that night.
I don't know what the hell you're talking about, bro. No disrespect. I mean,
no, okay, that's fine.
I think you're trying to accuse me of something.
I'm not trying to accuse you of anything. I'm looking for your help. So I showed you this picture earlier.
Okay.
Is that you?
Yes.
That's you with the camouflage pants and the white t-shirt? Okay. All right. Do you know where that was taken?
No.
Do you know when it was taken?
No.
It was taken on December 21st at a gas station in Lincoln. All right? Okay. At 5 o'clock in the morning. Okay. Gary's girlfriend, her phone is in your car at this location. We know it for an absolute. You guys turned your phones off, but you didn't turn her phone off. Okay?
I think you better. Yes, can I have a lawyer, please? Because you're trying to accuse me of something that I have nothing to know.
Right, we're not going to talk to you further. If you want an attorney, that's fine. Okay?
I don't mean no disrespect.
I told you I would treat you with respect. I take no disrespect. If you want an attorney, we're done. Okay.
Gary Gromkiewicz and Michael Lambert were both charged with first-degree murder. Phone logs between the two showed a potential plan developing in advance of the murder. Gary had been at Leila's home as early as December 19th, during which time he placed calls and texts to Michael. At 9 p.m. on the 20th, Michael's Jeep was spotted parked outside the house and remained there for roughly 2 hours. 8 text messages were sent from Gary to his friend, and then the Jeep left. But he would return. Another call placed by Gary at 1:36 a.m. on the 21st was followed by Michael leaving his home in Pawtucket and driving back out to Brockton, arriving and collecting Gary and Leila at 2:30. Investigators and state prosecutors believed this correspondence showed the two men had been hatching a plan, one that was eventually executed. The state also believed that they had sorted out why Gary wanted Leila dead and had sought the help of his friend to make it happen. Gary had been in a relationship with his girlfriend, Miranda, for roughly 6 years. During a brief break that autumn, he began seeing Leila, and things had progressed rapidly, from dating to engagement, and then the pregnancy inside of a few months. They had ended their relationship shortly before the murder. There were conflicting accounts provided to detectives about what led to the split, but one way or another, Gary ended up back with Miranda. According to Gary's mother, she then reportedly gave him an ultimatum. He could be with either her or Leila, but not both, because he can't afford to have 2 families. It seems Gary made his choice. Gary professed his innocence to anyone who would listen. He posted on Facebook with the hashtag #FreeGaryGromkiewicz. He said Michael killed Leila because he was a sociopath. Gary claimed to be able to prove that investigators were ignoring evidence, and crucially, that he had a solid, provable alibi. Gary's claims were centered around the fact that he could not be placed at Carbuncle Pond, or at a still undetermined location where Leila was killed. Based on the timeline they established, Rhode Island detectives developed a theory of the crime that was adopted by prosecutors as they prepared for trial. They believed that the murder had occurred in the Buttons Woods section of Warwick during the 45 minutes in which all 3 cell phones registered in the same area. Shortly after, Michael stopped at the 7-Eleven before driving to Carbuncle Pond. Except from 5:05 a.m. until 8:14 a.m., there was no cell phone location data tracking Gary, nor was he captured on camera. Although it seemed likely that the murder had already taken place in Warwick, there was no murder scene, no way of knowing exactly what time during the night Leila was killed. Gary wrote in one post online, "There wasn't any evidence at all proving I had anything to do with this, because I didn't. No DNA from me linked to this. No eyewitnesses, no cameras, no phone pings, no murder weapon, no motive." When Gary finally spoke openly with detectives, he told them that he had been dropped off by Michael before 5 a.m. Michael Lambert killed Leila, then drove to Cumberland to meet him the next morning.
Talk to us about. I asked to speak with you because I'm charged with murder, and I did not commit the murder. Michael Lambert did, and I just want to tell you what really happened.
Gary explained that he had been at Leila's home for 2 days. He had proposed to her a second time with a new ring and placed it on her finger. He would choose to be with her instead of Miranda for the sake of their baby. Leila, he said, rejected this arrangement. She said he could choose to step away as a father and she would raise the child alone. He rejected that proposal.
She asked me if I still love Miranda. I said, yes. You know, I love you both differently. Miranda and I have a lot more history together. So she asked me if I want to be with Miranda. I said, I do. You know, but I want our baby to have both parents in the household. So we talked for a while. We both agreed that a marriage for the sake of the baby wouldn't be good.
After days and many hours of discussion, Gary called Michael at 1:36 a.m. for a ride back to Miranda's in Cumberland, he said. He could not afford an Uber. When Michael arrived, however, he invited Leila to come out with them, and she had agreed. According to Gary, the group then went to a park in Warwick. Gary wanted to smoke marijuana and head home. He separated from the two and began walking to Cumberland along a bike path, eventually jogging to keep warm. His phone, almost dead, was forgotten in the Jeep.
So I called him, and we were on speakerphone. He invited Leila out with us. Leila wasn't supposed to come with us. I can't bring one woman to another woman's house. They never met. That wouldn't be right. It's the middle of the night. Miranda said the only time she wanted to meet her is after she had a child. She would meet her for the co-parenting, but she didn't want any type of relationship with her. So we got into the car. I drove to Shell gas station. Then he said, let's go to Warwick City Park. So we were riding around. When we got to Warwick City Park, the gate was closed, and it was already late. So I said, she got to get home. I got to get to Miranda. What are we going to do? And he said, I could give her a ride back. I want to smoke a blunt. I said, I'm not going all the way back to Brockton because I never invited her. He did. So I told him, just call me when you're done. Give me a ride back. So when he left, I was walking, smoking. I realized I didn't have my phone on me. I forgot it. So from there, I was like, all right, I'm just going to get back to Miranda's myself.
Gary explained that Michael was meant only to drop off Leila and then pick him up after on the way to Cumberland. Since his cell phone had been left in the Jeep, they were unable to reconnect for directions to his location. By the time Michael spotted Gary on the street and collected him, it was several hours later, and he had already covered most of the distance, roughly 26 miles, on foot. Gary said he was around the corner from Miranda's house when he spotted the Jeep. He got in, went to the house, changed his clothes for the day, and then went back out.
And how long would you say it took you?
It was a few hours. I was jogging. I was cold. I remember it being very cold that night, and I smoked a blunt, and so I don't really remember specifically times I was high. But it was a while. I changed my clothes. Now, I seen in the paperwork that it was questioned, why did I change my clothes? Well, it was the next day I changed my clothes daily. That's why I changed my outfit.
There were elements to Gary's story that were almost too convenient. He claimed that the pink bag that he carried into the house was full of Michael's clothing, which he had agreed to wash for him. Police would not find the clothing in the house, however, because Michael later told him that they were full of bedbugs, so he handed the bag back without ever looking in it. There were also obvious questions why they left Leila's in the middle of the night to just drive around, and why Gary would jog over 25 miles to Miranda's in the freezing cold. But regardless, there was one claim that, if true, would counter all of this: Gary's alibi. He claimed to have spoken with a couple on the bike path to get directions.
Do you have any memory of what these people you encountered looked like? Were they male, female?
There was a male and a female.
About how old?
They were in their 20s.
Do you know where they were from, why they were out that time of night?
So there's somebody that knows me that says they know who they are. And he said they want to testify on my behalf, but they're a little nervous about getting into a murder case. The person who told me his name is Ivan. So he's going to talk to them to see if they'll testify on my behalf that they had seen me, I was smoking, and I had asked to go. But he didn't want to tell me who they were because they weren't really sure.
Okay. Now, this Ivan person, is that one of the two people you encountered that night, or is this someone else?
I did not encounter him that night, no.
Okay. And so how does Ivan fit into this?
So Ivan worked with me briefly for about a week, and he lives in Buttonwoods. So he said when his friends had seen the news, they let him know we seen that guy around that time.
Ivan's girlfriend, a woman named April, visited Gary while he was in custody. According to him, April brought news of the young couple, and that they may be willing to come forward on his behalf. Both Gary and Michael pleaded not guilty and went to trial in January 2025. In an unusual move, Judge Louis Mattis sat two separate juries simultaneously, one for each defendant, to determine their individual verdicts based on the same evidence. Gary's defense argued that the evidence in the state's case was circumstantial. There were too many gaps. Much of what was presented at trial focused on the pair's actions after the fact. After the Jeep left Miranda's house that morning, investigators had continued to track its movements. A camera on Grenville Street in Pawtucket captured video that seemed to show a black sneaker being thrown from the vehicle. The side of the road appeared free of any visible items, but as the Jeep passed, a black object appeared in the grass on the passenger side of the roadway. There, police recovered a single black left size 12 Puma sneaker, like the ones worn by Michael in the Shell gas station hours earlier. There was no blood or DNA found on the shoe, however. Both men's cell phones later traveled to St. Anne's Cemetery, located in the Knightsville section of Cranston. At the cemetery, in a wooded area along Cranston Printworks Pond, they found a rear cargo area matched to a Jeep. When detectives examined Michael's Jeep, the rear cargo mat was missing. A presumptive test for blood on the mat was positive, though a sufficient sample could not be obtained for further testing. Where the forensics were certain, however, was in other areas of Michael's vehicle. A sample taken from the material on the driver's side of the Jeep's trunk tested positive for human blood. DNA analysis further showed a mixture of two contributors. The major component was consistent with a Leila Duarte DaLuz. Gary's behavior after the murder was a further cause of suspicion and speculation. He tried half-heartedly to contact Leila on Christmas Day. Then, after learning of her death on the 29th, he did not appear sufficiently upset. Two pieces of evidence blew apart Gary's defense. Searches on Miranda's cell phone returned a curious history, specifically looking for how to disconnect a cell phone from the network to avoid detection. Prosecutors suggested that Gary, and not Miranda, conducted these searches prior to the murder. The proverbial nail in the coffin of Gary's defense was the testimony of April Bateman, the one-time friend who Gary claimed had told him about the alleged couple supporting his alibi. April testified that when she met Gary in custody, she brought up no such thing. He did, however, ask her to lie for him. April obviously refused the offer and testified for the prosecution. Testimony to the dual jury was presented over 10 days. While Gary's defense pointed the finger at his co-defendant, Michael's defense deflected straight back. They argued that he was being made into the fall guy due to his violent criminal past, but that he did not have the intent to kill Leila.
Closing arguments were completed on the morning of January 17th, 2025. By the next morning, both juries returned with their verdicts within minutes of each other. Guilty of first-degree murder, as well as conspiracy.
At the sentencing hearing, the state argued for no mercy.
Gary Gromkiewicz pleaded his innocence and fired his attorney.
Mr. Gromkiewicz was brought up today. He advised me that he believes there's been a breakdown in the attorney-client relationship, and he's asked that I move to withdraw so that he can represent himself at the sentencing hearing today and the motion for a new trial.
Ms. Larson has failed to be effective counsel every single way of this trial. She didn't even check my alibi. Nobody knows where I was that day. I'm innocent. It's the responsibility of an attorney to hire a private investigator to actually check their alibi. I love Leila Duarte DaLuz. I did not kill Leila Duarte DaLuz. I will remain innocent till I die.
Leila's family flew to the United States to watch the court proceedings. Her sister told the court that Leila had been thrilled to be pregnant, that she had wanted a family, and she had wanted that with Gary Gromkiewicz. And that was the tragic case of Leila Duarte DaLuz.